What if the most damaging royal scandal wasn't about money, titles, or betrayal, but about identity? Think about that for a second. Not headlines, not palace drama, not who said what on which balcony, but the most basic question any person can ask: who am I really? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. For decades, Prince Harry has lived under a shadow that refuses to disappear. A rumor so persistent it outlived tabloids, newspapers, and even the era that created it. A rumor whispered in corners, recycled online, and resurrected every time Harry steps further away from the royal family. The James Hewitt question. You've heard it before. You've probably rolled your eyes at it. And yet, here it is again. Why now? Why, at a moment when Harry is already estranged, already isolated, already redefining his life outside the monarchy, has this story resurfaced with such force? Some claim it's about DNA results. Others insist it's about truth finally coming out. But what if the real story isn't about proof at all? What if it's about pressure? Pressure on a man whose entire life has been lived in public. Pressure from a family built on bloodlines, succession, and legacy. Pressure from an internet that no longer cares whether something is true, only whether it spreads. Ask yourself this: if millions of strangers kept questioning whether you truly belonged to your own family, how long would you stay silent? Harry's life has already been defined by separation. First emotionally, then geographically, and finally publicly. He stepped back. He spoke out. And in doing so, he crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. Now, with these rumors roaring back louder than ever, some claim he's reached another breaking point. Not a statement, not an interview, but a clean emotional cut. Cutting ties. And here's where things get uncomfortable. Because the rumor itself isn't new. The speculation surrounding James Hewitt has been debunked, contradicted, and dismantled more times than most people can count. Timelines don't match. Facts don't line up. Even Hewitt himself has denied it. So why does it still matter? Because facts don't drive outrage, feelings do. In the age of viral clips, fake documents, and anonymous accounts claiming insider knowledge, truth doesn't need evidence anymore. It just needs momentum. And once the word DNA enters the conversation, everything changes. DNA sounds final, scientific, unarguable, even when it's completely fabricated. And that's the trap. Because once you attach the idea of DNA to a rumor, you turn gossip into something that feels definitive. You transform speculation into identity theft. And suddenly, the story isn't about tabloids anymore. It's about whether a man's place in history is real. Imagine living with that. Imagine being told that your grief, your trauma, your anger, even your inheritance might not count. Imagine feeling like the door was already closing only to realize someone else is trying to erase the hallway behind you. Is it any wonder then that Harry might finally say, enough. Enough explanations. Enough defending himself. Enough trying to belong to a system that keeps questioning his right to exist within it. Because when identity is attacked long enough, loyalty is usually the first thing to fracture. But to understand how this moment was reached, we need to go back. Back to where the rumor began. Back to how it survived every contradiction. And back to why some stories refuse to stay buried, no matter how many times the truth stands in their way. And that's where this really starts. Some rumors fade out quietly. This one learned how to survive. Before social media, before viral clips, before DNA became a buzzword people throw around without understanding it, there was already a whisper following Prince Harry everywhere he went. It floated through tabloids, comedy sketches, late-night jokes, and private conversations that were never meant to be public. A rumor repeated so often it stopped sounding like gossip and started feeling like folklore. And folklore is powerful. It doesn't need proof. It just needs repetition. The story always pointed in the same direction. James Hewitt, red hair, military background, a past connection to Diana. To some people, that was enough to build an entire alternative reality. They ignored timelines. They ignored dates. They ignored the simple fact that Harry was born years before Diana ever met Hewitt. Why? Because logic doesn't travel as far as a good story. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't like to admit. The rumor didn't survive because it made sense. It survived because it was entertaining. It reduced a complex human being into a punchline. It gave people permission to question his legitimacy without ever questioning their own cruelty. Think about it. Why did this rumor attach itself to Harry and not anyone else in the royal family? Why wasn't it William? Why wasn't another royal cousin? Because Harry was different. He didn't look like the heir. He didn't behave like the institution. Difference makes people curious. Curiosity turns into suspicion. And suspicion, when repeated long enough, becomes belief. For years, this rumor would flare up and die down in cycles. A tabloid headline here, a joke there. Then silence, until the next trigger. A scandal, an interview, a family disagreement. Every time Harry stepped out of line, the rumor returned as punishment. As if to say, remember, you don't really belong. That's the part people rarely talk about. This wasn't just about who his father might be. It was about undermining his place. His legitimacy, his right to speak as a royal, as a son, as a brother. When people questioned his bloodline, they weren't asking out of curiosity, they were casting doubt on his voice. And over time, something strange happened. The rumor evolved. It stopped being framed as a question and started being framed as an assumption. You can see it in the language people use online. Not is it possible, but everyone knows. Not has this been proven, but why won't they admit it? That's how misinformation matures. And the internet supercharged it. Memes replaced articles. Clips replaced context. And suddenly, a story that had been publicly debunked multiple times was reborn for a generation that never saw the original facts. To them, it wasn't an old tabloid lie. It was something they just discovered. New audience, same poison. Meanwhile, Harry grew older, more outspoken, more distant. Each step away from the royal family was treated by some as confirmation rather than consequence. As if leaving was proof of the rumor, instead of a reaction to years of pressure, grief, and scrutiny. Ask yourself this. If your entire life people hinted that you were an accident, that you didn't really belong, that your presence was a mistake, would you feel loyal to the people who never shut it down hard enough? Or would you eventually stop fighting for a seat at a table that keeps questioning whether you deserve to sit there? That's the emotional core of the story. Not DNA, not science, but erosion, because rumors like this don't explode. They drip, slowly, quietly, over decades. Until one day, the structure underneath finally cracks. And when that crack becomes visible, people don't ask what caused it. They just say, see? We were right. Here's the moment where everything tipped from rumor into something far more volatile. One word, DNA. Suddenly, the conversation changed tone. It wasn't jokes anymore. It wasn't whispers. It wasn't, I heard someone say. It became screenshots, anonymous posts, bold claims written in all caps, insisting that the truth had finally been confirmed and that the palace was hiding it. And that's the danger of that word. DNA sounds final, scientific, unarguable. But most people throwing it around online don't understand how it actually works, and they're counting on you not understanding either. Let's slow this down. There has never been a verified DNA test released proving anything about Prince Harry's paternity. No laboratory confirmation, no credible journalist standing behind the claim. What spread instead were fabricated images, anonymous insiders, and AI-generated text designed to look official enough to fool someone scrolling too fast. And people were scrolling fast, because outrage moves faster than facts. Ask yourself something uncomfortable. When was the last time you stopped to verify a screenshot before reacting to it? When something looks official, how often do you question whether it actually is? That's the trap. In the digital age, misinformation doesn't arrive screaming. It arrives wearing a suit, a letterhead, a fake seal. It mimics authority just long enough to be believed, and once belief sets in, corrections barely matter. What makes this even darker is the timing. These claims didn't resurface during a quiet moment. They surged when Harry was already under pressure, estranged from his family, criticized for his memoir, accused of betrayal, framed as the problem child who wouldn't stop talking. So when the DNA rumor returned, it didn't land in a vacuum. It landed on a wound. Online, the narrative quickly twisted into something cruelly simplistic. If Harry didn't belong by blood, then his pain didn't count. His anger didn't count. His voice didn't count. Suddenly, decades of grief, including the trauma of losing his mother, were reduced to a punchline wrapped in pseudoscience. And that's where James Hewitt re-entered the story yet again. Not as a person, not as a man with his own life, but as a symbol people could use to destabilize someone else. The irony is brutal. The same timelines that disprove the rumor have been publicly available for years. The same denials have been repeated clearly, but none of that matters when the audience isn't looking for truth. They're looking for confirmation of what they already feel. And what many people feel about Harry is complicated. Some sympathize. Some resent him. Some feel betrayed by him. And misinformation feeds on emotional division like fuel. Think about what it does to a person to see their identity debated like a conspiracy thread. To watch strangers argue about whether you're real enough. To realize that no matter what you say, someone will always claim there's a secret file somewhere proving you don't belong. At some point, silence stops being weakness. It becomes self-preservation, because engaging with lies gives them oxygen. Denying them invites repetition, and correcting them doesn't stop the next wave from coming. So when reports began circulating that Harry had cut all ties, people rushed to interpret it as guilt, as confirmation, as proof that the rumors had finally gotten to him. But what if it wasn't about guilt at all? What if it was about exhaustion? What if it was the moment he realized that defending himself only kept the machine running, and the only way to win was to step away entirely? Because when misinformation reaches this level, the damage isn't about what's true or false anymore. It's about what it costs to keep explaining your existence. And that's when the story stops being about DNA and starts being about what really breaks a family. Because the final fracture wasn't genetic, it was emotional. And what happened after that silence is what changed everything in ways no one was prepared for. Here's the part of the story that most people miss. The real rupture didn't happen when the rumor resurfaced. It didn't happen when fake DNA claims flooded the internet. And it didn't even happen when headlines started shouting that Prince Harry had cut all ties. It happened much earlier. It happened the moment silence became safer than belonging. Think about how this story began. With a question about identity. With whispers that slowly turned into assumptions. With a man who spent his entire life being told, subtly and sometimes not so subtly, that he was different, less aligned, less fitting, less royal. For years, Harry tried to exist inside the system anyway. He played his role, he wore the uniform, he smiled for the cameras, he protected the image. And when he couldn't anymore, when grief and anger and frustration finally spilled out, the punishment was immediate. Not just criticism, delegitimization. Because once you question someone's bloodline, you don't just question their history, you question their right to speak, their right to inherit, their right to matter in the story at all. And that's why the DNA rumor is so toxic. Not because people believe it, but because it gives them permission to dismiss him. If he's not really one of them, then his pain becomes optional. His voice becomes suspect. His decisions become easier to mock. And when he walks away, the same people who pushed him out point and say, "See? He never belonged." It's a perfect loop. So when reports claim Harry cut all ties, the instinct is to frame it as drama, as revenge, as immaturity. But what if it's something far quieter than that? What if it's grief finally reaching its limit? Grief over a mother he lost in front of the world. Grief over a family that values silence over healing. Grief over realizing that no matter what he does, someone will always rewrite his story for him. At some point, you stop explaining yourself. Not because you have something to hide, but because you're tired of defending your right to exist. And here's the irony that should make everyone uncomfortable. The institution built on bloodlines, succession, and heritage is the same institution that allowed a decades-old rumor to linger without fully killing it. Whether by strategy, avoidance, or tradition, the silence remained. And in that silence, the internet filled the gaps. That's not a DNA failure, that's an emotional one. Because families don't break apart over science. They break apart over trust, over protection, over the feeling that when it mattered most, someone chose the system over the person. So when you hear that Harry has cut ties, ask yourself a different question. What if this isn't about abandoning his family? What if it's about finally choosing himself? Choosing peace over proximity? Choosing distance over constant invalidation? Choosing a life where his identity isn't a public debate? In the end, the most damaging test wasn't genetic. It wasn't done in a lab. It didn't involve samples or results. It was emotional. And once that test failed, everything else became inevitable. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this rumor will ever truly disappear, or has the internet permanently changed how public figures can protect their identity? At what point does speculation become cruelty? If this story made you think differently, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more deep dives like this, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Because the conversation doesn't end here, it just gets quieter. And sometimes, silence says more than any headline ever could.